learn how to make hand pies. Now, one great thing to do is to have your crust made up and ready to go in the refrigerator, because actually this crust does work better, and storing it in your refrigerator gives time for the gluten to soften and make the crust a little more pliable, which maybe normally isn't a good thing in a pie, but in these little hand pies you want a little more flexible crust. So you can use either refrigerated pie dough. You can also buy refrigerated pie dough ready to go. It comes in tins or in a roll. Or you can even use bread dough. So I made up this bread dough and I've kept it in the refrigerator instead of a pie crust if you like a little more bread-like dough. Bread dough is normally used for like calzones, like pizza pies and meat pies and other pies like that. But I'm going to show you how to make the crust. Now my favorite crust recipe that I've been using lately was found in this cookbook, the Better Homes new cookbook from like 1960 or so. And I've slightly modified it to follow. This calls for 1.5 cups of sifted all-purpose flour, which I have sifted and bleached flour here. A half a teaspoon of salt, well, we're going to skip the salt. A half a cup of shortening, and for our shortening, we're going to use coconut oil. Sometimes I use butter or coconut oil, but since I have the coconut oil here today, I'm going to use that. So this coconut oil will solidify it melts at the temperature of 76 degrees, which isn't very much. So if you want more solid shortening, which a lot of people say you need for a pie crust, then you should put this in the freezer or refrigerator ahead of time. Mine's been sitting at room temperature. So we got a half cup of shortening. I'm going to stir that around with my wire whisk, or if you have a pastry cutter, it works good too. You want it to be like, they say cornmeal. Actually, pie crusts like this have a lot of fat per flour ratio. So you're going to look at it and say, what? That's got to be way too much fat in there. Okay, I'm going to roll the cutter instead. Every time I make this recipe, it's seeming like too much fat. So, don't try your wire whisk. I just found out it doesn't really work. This is called a pastry cutter, and you're just for cutting the fat into your flour, and it works really good. I just discovered this tool not too long ago. Before that, I always used my my hands. I just used my hands and kneaded it up. Okay, I followed the recipe here and used the half a cup of shortening, and as you can see, it looks like a little too much shortening in there. So you probably don't even need the 1 tablespoon of cold water that it calls for this recipe. So here it is. Now I'm going to put this back in the refrigerator and actually use the refrigerated dough that I had already. So the recipe calls for 1.5 cups of flour, half a teaspoon salt, half a cup of shortening, and 4 or 5 tablespoons of cold water, to which you should add 1 tablespoon of vinegar. So you're probably only going to need about 3 tablespoons in total. So 2 tablespoons of ice water, 1 tablespoon of vinegar. And then just store that in your refrigerator. So now for the hand pies. So I like to have my dough, as I said, ready to go ahead of time. And I make this up ahead and then I store it in bags in the freezer. So when I want to make pies, I can just have it ready to go. So when you're ready to make your pie, today we're going to make bean pies. Bean pies and apple pies. So by keeping my crust all ready to go in the refrigerator, I can just slice off a little piece. Pull it out to the right size. And as I said earlier, or maybe I forgot to say that earlier, you can make these up ahead of time and keep them frozen in your refrigerator. You bake them ahead, and then when you reheat them, I just put them on a cookie sheet or in a cake pan, spritz them with a little bit of water, and reheat them in the oven for 5 or 10 minutes. Or if you prefer, you can also just pop them in the microwave. So you want to just roll it out, not too thin, but not too thick. I would say probably about like this, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. So you don't want it paper thin because the fillings are going to be pretty bulky in these pies, and you don't want them to fall apart. We're going to make 2 different kinds of pies here today. I have some leftover sauteed apples to make a nice apple pie. You can use any kind of fruit filling, sauteed apples, pumpkin pie filling, jam, whatever you want. And you can make sweet or savory hand pies. So you put your filling on there, and then just pinch the edges together. Voila! Now you really need to pinch the edges tightly because these will like pop open and leak out, especially if you're using jam or something. So what I do is I, between my finger and thumb, pinch a little pinch of the side crust together. This makes them look nice and rustic. You won't even need to grease your pie sheet, which it will say in your recipe book, because this recipe has so much shortening in it, or butter, that they won't even stick. So that's the apple fruit pie. Now, I've also made here a nice bean filling. I've got it here in my food processor. My bean filling, I put leftover cooked beans, onion, peppers, tomatoes, and different spices. So those have been ground up here in my food processor. And just the same, I'm going to take some of this leftover bean filling to make a nice bean pie. You can also use leftover stew, especially if it's good and thick, or maybe peanut butter and jelly, or let's see what other savory fillings. Plain old cheese, you can put sausage in it. Be creative. This is the experimental kitchen, right? So I do these the same way. If it's got a little too much on the sides, you can trim that off. There you go, pinch your edges together. This takes a little bit of practice, but after making a few hand pies, you will get the hang of it. Put it on your cookie sheet. You want to bake them at approximately 350 degrees for 10 or 15 minutes until the crust is golden brown. I'm going to go ahead and put these in the oven right now, and we'll get back to them later. Okay, now we actually have the pies ready to go.
Okay.
So, our pies are now done. And don't they look beautiful? These hand pies are great for packing in your lunch or eating on a car trip or even just having on hand for a little after school or after work snack. So who from my studio audience would like to come up here and try a tasty bean pie? Hello.
Hello.
So this is the bean pie. Here you go. Take a bite. Tell me what you think. Hopefully it won't be too spicy. Good, aren't they?
Perfect.
Very satisfying. Thank you. So that's all for today. Enjoy your hand pies, and we'll see you again next time at Joey's Experimental Kitchen.